The truth is, we don't always have control. I know. Accepting that isn't easy. I've struggled with this myself. What if I do something differently? What if I consider all the possibilities? What if I just try a little harder? As if, somehow, thinking enough or worrying enough could change things. Have you ever felt that way too? That heavy weight in your chest? The urge to hold on to everything, to fix it all, to find every answer? It's exhausting, isn't it? And deep down, we know some things are simply beyond our hands. But what if the problem isn't what's outside our control, but the fear of letting go? Because surrendering, trusting, releasing, that's terrifying. It's like letting go of the steering wheel in the middle of a storm. But maybe, just maybe, that's the only way to find peace. Letting go of control. This idea has terrified me for years. I've always been the kind of person who likes to have a plan, to anticipate what might happen. But life doesn't always fit into our plans, does it? I remember a friend who went through something that deeply impacted me. She was always extremely organized, someone who liked to keep everything under control. But one day, without warning, her life fell apart. Her marriage suddenly ended. The job that had seemed secure was cut. And in an instant, everything she had built slipped through her fingers. I remember the first conversation we had after it all happened. She was sitting across from me, gripping a cup of coffee with trembling hands. And she said, "I tried to hold everything together, but it didn't work. The harder I tried, the more things slipped away from me. Now, I don't even know what to do anymore." And I understood exactly what she was feeling, because I've been there too. Moments when no matter how hard I fight, the situation just keeps slipping further out of my grasp. It's a silent kind of despair, that feeling of being alone in the middle of something you can't fix. It reminds me of Peter in the Bible. Do you know that story? The disciples were in a boat, caught in the middle of a storm, when Jesus appeared walking on the water. Impulsive as ever, Peter asked to go to him, and Jesus said, "Come." Matthew 14:29. At first, Peter walked forward without fear, but the moment he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the storm, he began to sink. That's exactly how it happens to us. When we fix our eyes on the waves, on uncertainties, on things we can't control, fear takes over. Anxiety grows. But when we fix our eyes on God, something shifts. My friend told me that after many exhausting attempts to fix everything, she finally gave up. She told me that one night, drained of all strength, she simply said, "God, I don't know what to do, so do it for me." And at that moment, for the first time in a long time, she slept peacefully. Not because everything was solved, but because she realized she didn't have to carry it alone. The truth is, surrendering control doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean being passive or refusing to fight. It means recognizing that there's a limit to what we can do, and that God sees beyond what we can comprehend. The problem is, we want God to show us the entire path before we trust Him. But sometimes, He only gives us light for the next step. That's how it was with Abraham. God said, "Go from your country to the land that I will show you." Genesis 12:1. Abraham didn't have a map. He didn't know the details. He only had an invitation to trust. And I wonder, how many times does God invite us to trust Him, but we hold back, waiting for guarantees before letting go? I don't know what you're going through right now, but maybe you're trying to hold on to something you should have already surrendered. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to fix something that no longer has a solution in your hands. What if it's time to stop fighting alone? What if it's time to let go and trust? But I get it. Letting go isn't easy. Most of the time, it's terrifying. Because trusting means giving up our desire to predict, to plan every detail, to ensure that everything will turn out exactly as we imagined. My friend told me that at first, surrendering her worries to God felt like giving up. She felt that if she stopped trying to control everything, things would fall apart even more. Then, something happened. Slowly, as she surrendered each worry, she realized the weight she had been carrying started to lift. The situation didn't change overnight, but what changed was the way she faced it. And this is the truth. Sometimes God doesn't change the circumstance immediately, but He changes the way we go through it. When we release control and trust Him, we find a peace that doesn't come from having all the answers, but from knowing we are not alone, because God never asks us to carry something He has already promised to bear. I know. Letting go of control can feel impossible when you're in the middle of uncertainty. We want to do something, fix it, find a way out. Standing still and waiting for God to guide our steps feels terrifying. But when we look at the Bible, we see that some of the greatest stories of faith happened precisely when someone chose to trust God, even without understanding everything. Think about Moses. He grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but after an impulsive decision, he fled to the desert and spent years in hiding. Then God appeared and said, "I am sending you to bring my people out of Egypt." Exodus 3:10. Moses hesitated. He didn't feel capable. He didn't know how things would unfold. But even with fear, he took a step, and God did the rest. Or think about Esther. She had no power. She was just another young woman in the palace. But when her people were in danger, she had to trust that God would use her. She went to the king, even without knowing if she would survive. "If I perish, I perish." Esther 4:16. She let go of fear, and God used her to save a nation. And how many times do we do the opposite? We hold on to what we can't change, insisting on carrying burdens that God has already asked us to release. So maybe today is about taking a small step, not a leap into the unknown, but an act of trust. Maybe it's praying honestly, telling God exactly what's in your heart. Maybe it's releasing that worry you've been holding on to so tightly. Maybe it's simply resting and remembering that God is in control, even when you can't see the way. Trusting doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It means moving forward despite it. And God, He never fails to guide those who trust in Him. Surrendering control to God. It sounds easy when we talk about it, but in practice, it can be one of the greatest challenges of faith. Because letting go means accepting that we won't always have all the answers. And that's scary. We want guarantees. We want to know how things will end. But the truth? Faith isn't built on certainty, but on trust. I once heard a phrase that deeply impacted me. Faith begins where control ends. And that is so true. Because trusting isn't about understanding everything. It's about knowing that God does. It's about recognizing that even when we can't see a way, He has already prepared one. Look at your life right now. Maybe there are things you've been holding on to tightly, trying to fix, trying to understand. Maybe it's the fear of the future, a worry that seems to have no solution, or the desperate attempt to repair something that has already slipped through your hands. What if today is the moment to let go? That doesn't mean everything will be solved immediately. God doesn't always change the situation in the timing we want, but He changes how we go through it. He teaches us how to rest, even when the waters are still rough. Do you remember when Jesus was in the boat with the disciples and a violent storm arose? While everyone panicked, He was asleep. Mark 4:35-41. They woke Him up, desperate, and He asked, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Maybe that's the question for us today. Why so much fear? If God is in the boat, what can really sink us? Take a deep breath. God hasn't lost control. He never does. As Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." So, trust. You don't need to know where you're going. You just need to know who's guiding you.